everyone, and welcome to Tal Talks. This is our Sugar Plum Fairy December edition, and we are joined with someone who's really fun and awesome, and I'm super happy to talk to her today. This is probably the loopiest performer that I've ever met. This is Laloopna Hoops. Say hi!
Hey, way to make me blush with such a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, you're waiting for me to stop talking so you can actually talk.
Oh, no. I have a bad habit of interrupting because I get really excited and I want to jump in. So it's something I've been working on where, okay, slow down, let the other person talk.
Yeah, I do that too. I definitely do that too, especially when someone says something that I get really excited and I want to know more about it. I end up interrupting and I'm like, oh, I should have just stopped and listened. So why don't you explain a little bit about what you do at Renaissance fairs?
Okay, so I am a hula hoop performer and coach. I'm actually a certified coach. So most of my acts are heavily based on that, but a lot of what I do varies from event to event. So I'm never sure if I'm going to pepper in maybe some stilt walking, a little levitation wand. I'm learning on working fans and poi and various silks. So my performances tend to vary drastically depending on the event or what character I decided to be that day.
Some of those are really different. Yeah, like hooping and poi, they're similar in some ways, but that must take a lot of work to go through different routines.
It does take a lot of practice and translating. For example, double hoops translates really well to poi.
Oh.
I tend to be a single hoop manipulator, so my left hand still needs a lot of practice.
Huh. That's interesting. So what actually got you into hula hooping? What made you decide that was the thing for you that you just enjoyed doing so much?
I first saw hula hooping at a music festival in 2012. And honestly, that festival was a miserable experience for me personally. It was not a good time, but what came out of it was I saw other hula hoopers and I saw what they were doing and I was like, that's amazing. I was just entranced by it and I decided I want to do that. So I bought my very first hula hoop and I had no idea about any of it. So I bought a hoop that was way too small for me. Most people don't realize when you're trying to learn to hula hoop, the bigger the hoop, the easier it is. But for some reason, we naturally go for the smallest, shiniest, prettiest hoop we could find. So mine was way too small. And that weekend, I taught myself a couple of really simple, basic tricks just by playing around. Didn't really touch it for several years. Saw a few videos online. Actually, one of my biggest inspirations was Rachel Lust, who is famous for breaks and paddles, which is a particular type of hoop trick. She went viral, I want to say in maybe 2013 or so with a video to thrift shop. And I saw that and I was showing all my friends and I'm like, I want to do this. I have to do this. And I picked up a hoop again a little bit and dabbled, but never really got anywhere with it. Then in 2015, I went through a huge life shift and I went on a road trip across the country and I met my half sister, who was also a hula hooper. So she taught me a few tricks that night, let me play with her LED hoop, which was so cool. And I'm like, oh my God, it lights up. She taught me a few things. And I decided, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And I started practicing like crazy. I had moved back to New Hampshire. I hadn't found a job yet. And it was the middle of summer. So I spent anywhere between an hour and 6 hours a day.
Oh my gosh.
With my hoops. Just over and over and over. I was covered in bruises. I was constantly sore. I think I lost about 20 pounds in the first 2 months. Just constant movement and practice.
I think that's what people don't tend to realize about a lot of the performers that I've talked to is the amount of practice and work that goes into their act. people always say, oh man, I wish I could do that. And it's like, well, you just have to have the time and put a lot of work into it.
Exactly. People get to see the polished product.
Yeah.
We spend so much time practicing. And then, especially in today's world where so much of it is either posted to social media or it's an edited video being released, you get to see the 1,000,000,001 times we dropped the hoop, or we wailed ourselves in the face, or the hoop ran away and we go flailing after it. Everyone messes up.
Yeah. Well, I've actually seen you live a bunch of times and I've never seen any mistakes.
That just tells you I've been practicing enough to catch the mistakes as they're happening. It's actually one of my favorite sayings. If you haven't dropped your hoop in a while, it's time to learn something new. Another saying I heard in regards to hooping was, you don't learn how to become perfect. You learn 1,000,000,001 ways to catch and roll with the mistakes.
Yep. That's actually, that's funny because when we talked to a magician a while back, he was talking about how when the trick goes bad, basically he just learns all these new ways to make it look like it's part of the act.
Exactly. And part of the way I present my act is I'm very focused on showing everyone that they can learn to do what I do. So if I mess up in my act, it's kind of perfect for that. It shows everyone I'm only human. I mess up too. Just because I look like I'm perfect up here doesn't mean you can't learn to do it too.
So how many hoops is the most hoops that you've ever hooped? I don't know if that's the right.
Yeah, that works. In regards to hooping or other various flow arts, we use the term flow.
Okay.
So flow is, to define it simply, is kind of like a state of meditation. I tend to describe it as don't think, just move.
I get that.
That point where you don't have to think about what you're doing next. You just go. So to flow with hoops is a good way to put it. Typically, I am not a multi-hooper. It's not what speaks to me, although I do find it fascinating. There are such things as slinky hoops where you have maybe 50 hoops all attached.
Oh my gosh.
I know I've tried it before because as a teacher, I love to play with my students and have some time in class to just goof around and see what we can discover. So I think I've tried maybe about 10 hoops, but it didn't go for very long. It was maybe a few, and then a few dropped, and then kind of little by little all hit the floor. But yeah, for me, I'm very focused on single hoop manipulation and working on various tricks.
Okay. Good to know. What is your most challenging trick? I don't think people realize how many different tricks there are that are involved in a lot of your routines, but what would you say is the hardest part of performing?
I would say the hardest tricks I do would be duck-ins. So I have a duck-in variation that I do two different ways. One is I take the hoop and I throw it up under my arm and it comes around, and as it arcs down and comes down in front of me, I actually have a hoop here. So as it starts to come down, what I do is I duck my head inside of the hoop. It makes a rotation around my neck, and then I pop it back off for a catch. So that was actually how I first learned to do a basic duck-in like that. The second more complicated one is from a chest roll. So for a chest roll, arms go out wide, and the hoop, I don't know if I can do this sitting. Well, give it a try. Let's see if I break things. Nope, can't do it against the wall. But the hoop comes along across from one hand to the other. For a duck-in, as that hoop hits your shoulder, you duck your head into the hoop for that rotation around the neck, bring it back up, and it continues to roll down. So I think those are my most complicated. But what I find really interesting is just because it's technically complicated doesn't mean an audience will respond.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's too quick or it's too technical.
I see that a lot with a lot of different acts. Yeah, jugglers, like when their hardest acts are generally the ones that people don't realize are the most, they're doing like, if they're like, oh, this is more pins than I've ever juggled, and everyone's like, okay.
Yep. One that I do a lot and everyone seems to love is this one called an isolation. This definitely takes some practice because you need to learn to stabilize the hoop. It's not the hoop moving, it's the hand moving around the hoop and creating the illusion that it's floating. Everyone
cool.
goes nuts over this one, but it's actually one of the simplest hoop tricks you can learn and with variations.
That's really cool. I love how, like, when you said duck in, the first thing I was thinking of was like a duck. I was just like, what?
There are a lot of really funny names for different tricks. There's actually another trick that everyone loves. It's where it's between the legs and you lift your knees and it causes the hoop to rotate up and down like this.
Yeah, I've seen you do that one. That one's cool.
It's actually called a wedgie. And I always get a kick out of telling everyone the name of that because I don't know where these names come from. They're just kind of generic in the hoop community. And it's just really funny to turn around and go, oh yeah, that trick's called a wedgie.
Oh, wow. Who names these things?
And you also asked, what is the most difficult part of what I do in performing?
Yeah.
First off, keeping glitter off everything I own. It gets everywhere.
Yeah.
But for the actual performance, I think the hardest part is coming up with my characters and concepts for different events because I like having a wide variety of different characters I can offer so they can be custom tailored to a particular event. And a lot of the times with that process, I create a lot of my own costuming. So I'll go thrift shopping and find different little pieces and go, oh, that's perfect for this. That's perfect for that. One of my personal favorites, I do a ringmaster. I could not find a good ringmaster's coat anywhere. I was going insane. I knew what I wanted. I couldn't find it. I went thrift shopping and found a plain black lady's jacket. And I decorated it. I created little leaves with the gold detailing. I put gold braiding all around it, all kinds of crazy glue. And it is absolutely perfect. It became what I wanted it to be.
That's really awesome. I'm trying to think of like all the different things that I've seen at thrift stores that you could make stuff out of, like wedding dresses and suits and things that you wouldn't even think about, but when you just change it a little bit, it turns into exactly what you were looking for.
You have to start with a vision. You have to create that vision of what you want in your head. Once you have that, you start looking and you can find little pieces and maybe shift the vision a little bit and get it to all come together. And all the time, that doesn't even require heavy duty sewing.
Yeah.
Which I know scares a lot of people.
Now, for you, though, I would think you'd have to have flexibility in your outfits. So you'd have to kind of change them to make sure that you can move around.
Definitely. That's something I have to keep in mind every time I create a character, a costume concept. What can I do in this? Do I have the freedom of movement I need? Is this character going to be strictly a hula hooping character? Is it going to be strictly stilt walking? I have a snow princess with this huge bell skirt.
I saw that.
No way I could ever hoop in it. That character is strictly for stilts.
Stilts, yeah. Speaking of stilts and other things like that, how many different performance types do you do? I know you do hooping, but maybe you could talk about all the other things that you have.
Yep. So hooping is my main focus. It's my first love that brought me into this level of performance. Stilt walking came a few years later. A friend of mine was offering lessons and I figured, why not? Let's learn something new. And after 4 lessons, I'm like, I need me a pair of those.
You must have really good balance to be able to do all these things.
I always joke, I can barely walk in high heels and yet I'm fine on stilts. It is a lot of balance, but what's actually interesting to me anyway, is that it changes the way you walk. When people walk normally, they walk heel, ball, toe. If you ever walking around and curious, look down at your feet, pay attention to it.
And now I'm doing it like while I'm sitting here.
Right?
Just to think about it.
Heel connects first, you roll through to the ball of your foot, and your toe is the last thing to hit the ground.
Yeah.
Dancers do the opposite. Dancers will walk and turn out, and they'll go toe, ball, heel.
Oh yeah, I've seen dancers like ballerinas do that kind of thing.
Stilt walkers, if they're using peg stilts, meaning they're standing on something about that big around, your weight is actually right in the center of your foot, pretty much the arch of your foot. And you pick your knees up and come straight up and down.
That sounds really uncomfortable to me. But I have high arches and nothing ever touches them. So I'm just like, ugh.
Arch support is a definite must for stilt walking shoes. Mine are actually physically bolted to my stilts. So there are bolts through the bottom so they won't move, plus foot straps to make sure it's extra secure so I'm not sliding around on them.
That's smart.
It's the safest way.
So you have stilt walking, you have hooping, what kind of stuff?
I am currently dabbling in learning poi, which most people would recognize as like 2 balls on strings, and fans. Fans are either LED or fire fans. They also make silk fans. So I'm dabbling in all 3 of those, but I always have a million things to do and I never seem to find enough time to practice everything. And I have prop ADD. I want to play this one. Ooh, that's pretty. I need one. What's this? I'm all over the board. I dabble in a lot of little things.
I really get that. I think that's every musician. We end up doing that with musical instruments. We're like, oh, I want to play that. Oh, I want to play that. And then you have a house full of musical instruments and you mostly just gravitate towards the one that that you play the most.
I have a house full of props, but I always come back to hula hoop.
Yeah, I have a house full of instruments and I always play bass. I do have too many basses, though. Don't let my husband hear me say that. I have 3 stand-ups, and then I have a ton of electric ones.
Nice. I have a lot of hoops because I teach. I have 50 hula hoops.
Whoa.
That's for teaching.
So you bring all the hoops to the class to teach?
Yes.
Oh, That's awesome.
Part of the reason I do that is because when you're learning hoop dance, you need a different type of hoop than what you could typically find at the store.
And people might not know their size, like you said.
Exactly. So I like being able to offer a wide variety of hoops, ranging from little ones for little kids to try and play to ones that are over 50 inches in diameter to help people learn how to waist hoop, because the bigger the hoop, the easier it is. That's
really cool.
And that's just my teaching hoops. I think my personal collection is close to about 20 different.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I was recently moving and my mom looked at me and went, you have too many hoops. I'm like, no, I need more.
What do you keep them all in?
My dad helped me create this great hoop hanger setup. It's actually the garden hose things. The metal things to hold garden hoses. We mounted wooden boards to the walls so we wouldn't cause wall damage.
Too much damage, yeah.
I learned that one the hard way. Industrial Velcro and wall paint don't go well together. So wooden board with the hose hangers on them, and you hang the hoops from that. When storing hula hoops, you either want to hang them so they don't warp or to lay them flat, because they are plastic.
Yeah.
Depending on how you store them, they will warp over time. And if your hoop goes wonky, that's going to mess with your ability.
Especially if you have so many, you don't want them all getting ruined. That's expensive.
Yeah. Especially because good hoops that you can learn on for hoop dance, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
A basic untaped hoop ranging at about 30 diameters is usually gonna run you at least $20 to $30, depending on the hoop maker. But
and then, like the professional, like big ones, like how much are those generally?
The really big ones that I use for teaching, I actually made myself.
Oh.
So you can actually learn to make your own hula hoops, but it's a lot harder than you might think.
They have to be balanced, right?
It's not so much balance, it's your connector. So a lot of hula hoops these days for hoop dancers, and I'll actually sneak in so you can see this on this. This is actually a push button rivet here. So I can disconnect this hula hoop and break it down for either storage or travel.
Oh.
So
That's really cool.
Yeah. But the most difficult part is getting a nice clean cut on the tubing so
Yeah.
your ends will fit together.
Yeah.
If it doesn't fit together smoothly, it will leave a gap. And that gap can pinch you when you're practicing. And I've had that happen from trying to make my own hoops, and it's not comfortable.
Ugh.
But for really big hoops, if you want to start with a beginner hoop to learn to waist hoop, you can actually go to stores like Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up irrigation tubing. And you can cut that, use that straight connector, and you'll have to hit that tubing with a hair dryer to really warm it up and make it pliable to get that to close.
So it's like PVC pipes you're talking about?
Not PVC. It's the irrigation tubing. It's HDPE, I believe.
Huh.
There are so many different materials used to make hula hoops. There's polypropylene. There's HDPE, which is high density polyethylene. They now make polycarbonates. Every material reacts differently and helps you learn different tricks or flow differently.
Because it was funny when you were talking about it, made me think of making boffer weapons for LARPs. How, I mean, those are PVC, but you end up, if you want to curve your weapon that you're creating, then you heat it up and you can get like a good curve on it.
Makes sense.
It was kind of funny.
Tubing, if you're fighting to get that connector closed, hitting it with the heat helps. But creating those hoops, I'm sitting there going, whew, I appreciate hoop makers. This is hard.
Huh. That's really neat. Well, we learned a lot about hoops.
Yeah. A lot of learning to hula hoop is learning your materials, learning what's going to make waist tubing easier, what's going to make bricks and paddles, even where you live. Polypro hoops are notorious for cracking in cold temperatures. You can't keep them in a cold car in the winter. Or if you want to take an awesome snowy video outside, you don't want polypro because if it's too cold, they'll snap and shatter on you.
And they probably warp in the heat, a lot of them too, huh?
The HDPE hoops, I find, get kind of gummy and tacky in heat. So I tend to shy away from those for summer gigs because I need something that's springy. It's going to move nicely and it's not going to get warped in that heat.
Because you really got to know a lot about the different materials to make sure that you have the right.
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Okay, so you do hooping, you're doing poi, stilt walking, and I know there's more stuff. What about fire?
I am working on fire. Part of the reason I don't offer it currently a lot is because New Hampshire is actually very, very strict about fire performance laws.
Huh.
So it is actually illegal to spin fire in New Hampshire without licensure.
Yeah, it's not illegal in Massachusetts, but most of the places that we rent, you have to have insurance.
Insurance is always a must for fire performance. Always, always, always get fire safety training if you're going to start playing with fire. Learn from other performers who are trained and know what they're doing. It's not something you just decide, oh, hey, I'm going to light this on fire and spin it around my body. No, please don't do that. Please, please, please. So I've been very fortunate. I've been able to study with a lot of different friends who are in the flow community, have years of experience. So I'm still in training. I'm learning a lot. I've been training with fire hoop. I've been training fire fans, palm torches, where it's a little wick that's attached to your hand. I recently ordered a hip belt, which I'm really excited about to get to learn. So fire eating as well. I've been dabbling with torches and fleshing. So I really love the fire aspect. I just know I need to go through the right checkpoints first before I can fully offer it.
Now, does that make you nervous working with fire, or are you just really excited about it?
No. I've always been a little pyro. I've always loved fire. And my mom hates that I do it. I actually made a personal pact with them. I will never ask my parents to buy me fire props. They support my love of it, but I'm not going to throw it in their faces. But
I can see why you get along with those sideshow performers so well.
Yeah, definitely. I've always loved fire, and my favorite thing about spinning fire is the sound of it. It has this roar to it, and I always joke with my friends, I'm weird. I like going to bed smelling like burnt hair and white gas.
Oh man. So back to hooping.
Back to hooping.
Since you do a lot of teaching of hula hooping, what advice would you want to give to someone who might want to start getting into that kind of act?
The best advice I can give is decide that you want it. So much of what I've learned from this whole crazy journey is that it came from me. I was in a really bad place personally when I first really picked up my hoops and started learning. I went through a huge life shift. I needed to rebuild myself, my identity, my self esteem. So I picked up a hoop as a way to relearn who I was, what I wanted, where I was going. And it really rebuilt my self esteem as well, because the more I practiced, the more work I put into it, the results were there. It started to show up, and suddenly everyone's like, that's amazing. I could never do that. You make that look so smooth. How do you do that? And it just completely rebuilt my confidence in myself by putting that work in and getting the results. So first thing you have to do if you really want to learn to hoop, decide that you want it and then fight for it. Second, get yourself the right tools. We talked a little bit about all the different types of hoops. If you set yourself up with the wrong tools, you're not going to achieve what you're trying to achieve. You're going to get angry. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to want to throw that dollar store hoop across the room and give up. Hooping is not a inexpensive hobby. It does take time. It does take money. But if you decide you want it and you're willing to put time, money, effort into it, then anyone can do it.
Probably a good way to stay in shape too. Burning calories.
Definitely. I need to start hooping again more because quarantine weight is a thing.
See, I have the opposite problem with the quarantine. I don't eat because I'm not out doing things. So I just forget. And then I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten all day and I'm so hungry.
It makes sense. It goes back and forth, and everyone copes with stress differently.
Yeah. Well, hooping sounds like a good way to cope with stress.
Definitely. It's actually a phenomenal form of meditation for people who suffer from anxiety, depression, any sort of mental illness. It tends to work as a phenomenal grounding technique for a lot of people. Because as I mentioned, flow is a don't think, just move kind of practice. It's a way to pull yourself out of your head and ground yourself.
Where do you normally teach your classes? Is that all in New Hampshire?
I am based in New Hampshire. I was teaching locally before this year. Actually, I did take a bit of a break from teaching for a while to focus more on the performing aspect. But I tend to go back and forth between the two, and I'm hoping once things tend to go back to a little more normal, I'll be able to balance the two. But I can offer Skype lessons as well for anyone who'd like to learn virtually, although I'm very much a in-person performer and teacher. So much of what I do is very off the cuff, in the moment. Half the time I don't even know what's going to come out of my mouth next. But that way it gives everyone an organic learning experience.
Yeah.
Because that way I can get to know my students and how their brain works, what kind of metaphor is going to connect with them. And if I can help out by physically touching, if people are okay with that, saying, okay, can I put your hand here? Can I help guide you through this motion? It helps people start to build that kind of muscle memory for those little moments when they're first figuring something out.
So what's your favorite aspect about performing? And what drives you really to come out and bring all the hoops and come all the way to Massachusetts and do the whole thing for us?
Well, my favorite aspect of performing is I think it lets me be the purest version of myself. I always grew up in theater. a great way to explain who I am as a person is when I was in first grade, school Christmas pageant, an eighth grader was going to have the solo for my class, the first graders. They took it away from her and gave it to me because I knew the lyrics and she didn't.
Oh my gosh.
I have always been a performer. As a child, I had to be taught the idea of stage fright, and it didn't make sense to me. I've noticed as I've gotten older, the concept of butterflies before a gig or a performance is something that's learned. As a kid, you have no fear.
That I was not like that. Nope.
A lot of kids have that aspect of, especially with hoops, you give them a hoop and they're, let's go, let's play. And they have no fear. But adults have fear. We've been taught fear.
Yeah, you don't want to look bad in front of other people.
What if I mess up? What if I look stupid? What if they laugh at me? A lot of kids don't have that constant what if running in their head.
Yeah.
So for me, getting on stage is as easy as breathing. It's where I get to let all the crazy in my personality out, and I can become Cece the Sugar Plum Fairy, or Selena the Sorceress, or Shayla the Scarecrow, and all these other crazy concepts I come up with. I get to let the crazy and the colorful that maybe doesn't necessarily fit into everyday society out.
Okay, that leads me to two questions. One is, you mentioned some of your characters. How many different characters do you have right now?
A lot. And I keep coming up with more. Some have names, some don't. The named ones are Selena the Sorceress, who made her debut with the Massachusetts Renaissance Fair. Cece the Sugar Plum Fairy actually just came out for a performance with you guys in December, which I'm looking forward to. Shayla the Scarecrow was one of my first stilt walking characters, other than Brenna the Butterfly, again, stilt walking. I have a ringmaster costume that I can do a couple different variations of. I love using that one for Halloween. I learned how to do creepy burn makeup this year, so I was running around a haunted walk with half of my face looking like it was all burnt and sloughing off, and this crazy ringmaster getup. Let's see, what other characters do I have? I have so many costumes and concepts. I do like a red, white, and blue for 4th of July. I have a lot of mix and match costume pieces that I've sewn myself. My sewing room is absolute chaos.
It's neat because it sort of makes you more versatile, so that, you know, depending on what the theme is of the Ren Fair or the event, you can always have something that works for it.
Exactly. And growing up in theater and being a nerd myself, I played a lot of D&D in high school. It gives you a fun chance to kind of look in at yourself and find aspects of your own personality that maybe you wish you could show more, or you kind of like to explore, and you can create this whole crazy character and this backstory of who they are and where they come from and how they got to be the way they are. And then you get to jump in front of an audience and go, hey, I'm so-and-so today.
See, that's what I love doing too, but I like doing it for other people. When I write all the different acts for the fair, then I get to watch other people be the characters that I make.
Nice. That's another great way to do it too. If you're not comfortable putting it out there yourself, there are so many amazing people out there who love what we do, who love getting up and becoming this crazy character and making people happy, bringing joy and laughter into people's lives.
So you seem pretty fearless when it comes to your performances, but has there ever been a performance that when you were going into it, you were nervous about, or something happened that made you uncomfortable?
Yes. I may seem fearless, but I promise it's all an act. I do get nervous. I get pre-gig jitters where the butterflies are going nuts. Actually, the first time performing with the Mass Ren Fair, my first show of the morning, I was terrified. I had spent months trying to craft a script and come up with it and thinking about jokes and audience participation and how am I going to do this?
And then there was like 5 people there because it was the morning.
Yeah, there were like 5 people there, and I was so nervous. I blew through what should have been a half-hour act in about 15 minutes. I was mortified. Like, oh my God, I can't do that again. So I took time to kind of center, relax, come down, and okay, first one's out of the way. Now just go with it. And what I've come to discover about my performances is when I'm doing these characters and these hoop performances, a script does not work well for me.
No, it never works for us either when we're doing our performances.
For me, it is another state of flow. I actually did a performance over the summer that was last minute. Another performer needed more performers for something they had been booked for. And they had actually been booked in New Hampshire, and they were from out of state and didn't know the fire licensing laws. I caught her and I'm like, hey, do you have a license for tonight?
Oh, no.
I have insurance. I'm like, no. New Hampshire requires a fire performer's license, and you have to have a permit for the performance. I believe you may even need a marshal on site. She had been hired through a middleman.
Yeah.
Neither of them had known that.
Oh, God.
So we scrambled. We decided to switch it to LED.
Yeah.
We get there, and the woman in charge of the performance wasn't happy it wasn't going to be fire, which is understandable. She paid for something, and she should get what she paid for. But at the same point, it was a legality issue.
Yeah.
So we explained, we're going to do LED. It's going to be the full show. Try and relax, And of course, it was a very professional. It wasn't like, calm down, you're getting a show. So it was a very stressful environment. We're freaking out going, can we pull this off?
Yeah.
And the poor girl in charge of the event was freaked, obviously, because it wasn't what she had planned for.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, listen, I'm a coach. This is what I do. Normally my shows are off the cuff. Just let me go. And she kind of looked at me, but we went on with the show. By the end of it, she was looking at me like, who is she and where did she come from? Like, I had no idea what I was going to do. I showed up with a couple of different hoops. I had a couple different LED props, and I just went, meh! And it was a huge hit. The show was great. We were able to bounce off each other, and we actually ended up going over the original 45 minutes. We were closer to 55, just because this is what I do. I go out there and just and see what comes out, and it seems to work.
That's awesome. I mean, that's awesome that it worked out. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there's always something that comes up pretty much every performance where it's never what you planned for or expected. So you kind of just have to have that going with the flow sort of attitude.
You got to be able to improv and roll with it. And I find that a lot with my stilt characters as well. For some reason, that stilt walking brings out a really weird side of people, particularly preteens for some reason.
Oh,
There was a gig I was working down in Mass for a holiday stroll, and I was in my big, poofy, silver princess, snow princess costume. And there was this group of teenage boys wandering around, and I'm like, oh. Always a little scary when you're up on stilts. And one of them decides to come over and ask about the stilts, and then goes, can I kick your legs?
No.
In my head, I'm freaking out. Like, no, you do that. I go down, I crack my head open, no more me. Like, what I'm doing is dangerous.
Yeah.
So every time I get up on stilts, that's really nerve-wracking for me.
At least they asked and didn't just do it.
Oh, well, that's why as a stilt walker, it's always phenomenal to have a spotter working with you, someone who can work crowd control, who can help scan the terrain for you, make sure there are no dangers like electrical cords or potholes or rocks, even candy wrappers or candy at parades.
Oh, geez.
It's a whole new world when you're 7 feet up in the air. You don't think about these dangers when you're flat on your feet.
Yeah.
And I actually had a little girl look at me once and go, I could never do that. I'd be too scared. And I looked at her and said, you want to know a secret? I'm always scared.
Yeah, I'm terrified.
Every single time I get up on those stilts, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Because I know how dangerous it could be if something goes wrong and I fall and I don't fall correctly.
Yeah.
But that's part of why I love it, conquering that fear and getting up there and going, yeah, I can do this. And then pulling off that amazing performance.
That's awesome. Well, you already told us some pretty funny stories, but do you have any funny stories or strange occurrences that happened at a gig?
Not sure if this is funny. I think it's more cute. It was hysterical to me. Mass Run Fair, I was stilting up, getting ready to stilt around. I had actually missed the parade because between my show and hauling hoops back to the green room and stilting up, I was a little late. But I decided I was going to roll with it. I actually then spent a good amount of time wandering around going, has anybody seen a parade? I was told there was going to be a parade, but those summer courts and winter courts are so busy arguing all the time. They can't even tell me what time I'm supposed to be here. Rolling with it. But I was over by the jousting ring because it was quiet. And when I stilt up, I like to do it out of the way to try and help preserve some of the magic. Because it's interesting to see how it's done, but it's a little more interesting if you have no idea how someone got up there.
Yeah.
And there were these two little girls, and they were having a snack, and they're watching me stilt up. So I'm strapping on my knee pads, and I'm pulling them on and tying my shoes. And I start chatting with them. I say, do me a favor. I'm preparing to cast a height spell, but I'm going to make you two my apprentices. Do you promise you will not tell anyone how this spell is done? Oh, yeah, we won't tell. The rest of the day, every time they saw me, they would come bouncing up to me. We haven't told anyone. It was the cutest thing I have ever seen.
I love the kids at the fairs. One of the best parts is just seeing how excited they are. Actually, it's fun seeing adults getting really excited about things too. It kind of brings out your inner child. Yeah, exactly. So is there anything that people should know before they go watch your show? Words of advice.
Biggest thing is keep an open mind and be willing to be silly and play. A lot of my shows, because I firmly believe absolutely anyone can learn to do what I do, I will pull audience members and I will teach you to do what I do. I can stand up here all day and tell you, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. But until I turn around and hand you a hoop and teach you something, you're not going to believe it. So being able to pull someone at random, maybe a volunteer who really wants to learn, or just go, you get up here. Like, it's a chance to demonstrate that I'm not just talking the talk, I'm walking the walk. Anyone can learn to do this.
I need to get to one of your hoop classes one of these days because they seem like so much fun.
Well, we could set up a Zoom lesson.
That would be awesome. Maybe when the weather's better, because I don't think I could do it inside.
Yeah, you definitely have to have some space for indoor hooping. I have beams in my house, which is all sorts of fun when I start to go for above the head stuff, because I will leave scrapes and scratches on the beams. So I've actually learned how to modify a lot of my over the head tricks to a point where I bend my elbow or whatever to kind of lower it. But practicing hooping definitely requires a decent sized space where you're not afraid you're going to break anything.
Or knock a cat out.
Cat doesn't really care when I hoop. She's actually off to the side watching me right now.
I had to kick mine out.
Over the years to stay out of the way. My brother's dog, when I first started hooping, absolutely terrified of the hoops. Wouldn't come anywhere near me. But the more I did it and the more she watched, she actually got to a point where she wanted to hoop with me. I taught her
so
to
cute.
jump through my hoops.
Oh my gosh.
She would just lay on the couch and watch me. There was actually a night I was having a really bad night, really upset, kind of staring off into space. She came over to me. She's looking at me, and she starts prancing in place. I'm like, what do you want? She ran over to my pile of hoops and started prancing again. Then came back to me and back to the hoops. She would not stop. until I picked up a hoop and started to dance.
You know how much attention you get for a dog show with your hoop show?
But it was amazing to me that she knew that the hoops bring me joy. They help ground me and bring me back to myself. People can see it, animals can see it. When you find something you love, don't let it go. Chase it. Anyone can do what I do. If it's a hoop, if it's stilting, if you want to learn poi, if you want to learn sewing, coloring, juggling, whatever you want to learn to do, decide you're gonna do it.
Good advice. Very good advice. Well, we have gotten to our Marf Tongue Twister Challenge. Are you able to get to the chat?
Let me see. I have never done Zoom before, so I see a chat.
And that is the tongue twister that I put in there. If you could do your best to say it as quickly as possible.
All right, give me 1 minute to read all the way through. I can't even say minute. This is not boding well. Okay. Pesky pixies pilfered plum pies from a pair of peculiar plum pickers playing panpipes.
Yay! Can you do it faster?
All right, round 2. Pesky pixies pilfered plum pies from a pair of peculiar plum pickers playing panpipes. Reminds me of a tongue twister I learned years ago for theater warm-ups. Maybe if I practiced it, I'd get better.
No, that was good. It's funny that like different performers, depending on what they do, are better at tongue twisters than others. Most of the ones that are really good are the ones that do like a lot of talking in their show, like magicians or sideshow people. That's part of the act, is just the
Definitely
banter.
I know sometimes I get so excited that my brain gets ahead of my tongue and I end up speaking like Yoda. It's just sorry, first day with a new tongue.
That's a good one. I like that. Oh,
Yeah, I learned that at a day camp when I was a kid, and I've kept it in my back pocket because it always comes in handy.
I feel like that would be a really good one for like a Halloween type show.
Definitely. That again goes back to what we were talking about, being able to improv, laugh at yourself and roll through it and move through.
Okay, so you were able to make it through our tongue twister challenge. I know that you will have a show playing on our pages this weekend, but what else do you have going on that you want to tell us about? Your websites, your classes, or anything you're offering?
Right now, things have been a little quiet, especially with the way things have been going this year. I think safety is very important, and a lot of what I do, because I provide the hoops, sanitizing the hoops can get a little iffy. So right now, I'm mainly offering, if people are interested in online classes, I can definitely offer that. I am offering performances that do social distancing. I'm totally comfortable wearing a mask, staying away from everyone. Stilt walking is great for that because I'm taller than everyone.
That's perfect.
But mostly I've been taking the time to really work on various aspects of what I do, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, working on practicing with some of the props I really want to get good at and eventually be able to offer. Working on a lot of sewing and costumes, various makeup concepts. I was a theater kid, so the behind the scenes stuff is just as much fun to me as what happens in front of an audience.
And you will hopefully be joining us at the Mass Run Fair in August. Hopefully everything will be running this year and everyone will be able to come and see you in person. That would be the best.
I would love it. Selena the Sorceress missed seeing everyone this year.
Yeah, we missed seeing you too. I miss seeing everybody. But it's going to make this next coming summer so much better.
Exactly.
We're all waiting and we're all really excited about it.
And it gives us creative types a chance to really work on stuff and put things together. So when we come back, we're going to come back strong.
And you have a website, Facebook?
Yes, I have Facebook and a website and an Instagram. So you can find me at www.laloopnahoops.com. That's LALOOPNA Hoops. You can also find me on Facebook as Laloopna Hoops, and same on Instagram.
Great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us and talking to us, and I can't wait to see your show this weekend.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute blast.
Bye.